Good afternoon, students. Good morning, good evening, whenever you are watching this video. Hello to you. So today I'll be discussing the questionnaire, the importance of, how to design your questionnaire and how to formulate questions or statements for your questionnaire using the literature that you have read and using the scales, items, or statements that other researchers have used. As I've mentioned before, formulating questions for your questionnaire is informed usually by previous studies and even previous measurements, questions, sometimes even questionnaires. You can use a questionnaire that has been used by another researcher, for instance, in the US, and you want to check if you get similar findings with the same study be performed in South Africa due to differing conditions in these countries or even differing cultures. So I would say, please give yourself a due date for the questionnaire. Give yourself at least by next week, Friday, so that you can distribute it over the holiday, over the long weekend, between 27 April and 1st May, when people will have more time in their hands, especially those who are working and studying. So please try to have your questionnaire ready before the end of the week. Again, for you to design your questionnaire, a good questionnaire, you need to go through your prescribed book, chapter 3. Deploy gives a number of guidelines on how to develop questions and even how to structure your questionnaire and the items, guidelines for how to formulate, for instance, questions, the do's and don'ts of formulating questions and statements for your questionnaire. So please study this chapter and go through those guidelines and then apply them when formulating your questionnaire. Use them to inform how you formulate your questions. Again, as I mentioned earlier, your questionnaire will be informed by the literature that you have read. So those 4 articles that you've read, 3 of them actually have a methodology section where they discuss how they collected data, which scale and whose scales they used. So please go back to those studies and see how they describe their data collection methods, which informs the items and the questions that they included in their questionnaires or in their interviews. One study actually used interviews instead of a questionnaire. So please go back and see how they describe their data collection methods. And this is also how you are expected to describe your data collection methods after collecting data. So here, this is Ferris et al. Describing their data collection methods. This is just one part. Here they explain that they received their study was approved by an institutional review board. Usually, you need to get an ethical clearance or approval from an institution, whether a research institution or university, to conduct a study. And then once the study was approved by this institution, after agreeing to participate in the study, participants completed the online questionnaire. So you need to have an informed consent where you inform participants of their rights. I will be showing you examples just now Okay, and then the participants completed an online survey. You need to mention that you used an online questionnaire, not just a questionnaire. Use an online questionnaire. They use Qualtrics as a platform, and then they were measuring social media dependency. You don't have to have this in your study, in your questionnaire, but what you need to have is social media motives as informed by the uses and gratifications theory. You need to have the contextual H. First, et al. Have broken this into two, which is life satisfaction and social activity. You need to have social media addictive outcomes. Ferris et al. Again also has broken this down into intrusive consequences and emotional consequences. So you also need to break down these addictive outcomes. I'll be showing you examples as we continue. And then demographics, which is supposed to be section A of your questionnaire. And then they mentioned that all study variables were measured on a 5-point Likert type scale, which is the same scale that you will be using for your questionnaire. All right, so in your section A, please make sure that you go through tutorial letter 101 guidelines, or the assignment 3 document guidelines for those writing the supplementary. So you need to have a self-introduction where you introduce yourself and the aim of the study. This is just an example. Please title your questionnaire. For instance, you can say questionnaire, social media use study, or a social media study. Just find ways to title this study. And remember, you are using UNISA students. So this is an example, and please also include your details. And here is you don't have to include your telephone number, just include your email address, your My Life email. You can also use your Gmail account. Participants need to have contact details so that where they have questions, they can ask you these questions. All right, next is inform. This is how a consent form usually looks like. So here you describe the rights that participants have. And again, remember, you have to inform your participants all the time that the study is anonymous. There will be no way to link their responses or answers to them. So they need to know that this is anonymous. And then again, once they've read through the consent form, then they can click on agree if they want to participate, or disagree if they don't want to participate. And then for the section B of your questionnaire, you are asked to have ask about the biographical details of your respondents. This is age, gender, race, and the better way to do this would be because usually, I think you've already just go check that consent form again. The age of participation in studies in South Africa is ages 18 and above until 65. And here you could group your participants according to generations, but try to have at least 3 categories and avoid having too many categories here. It will make it easy for you to analyze data. So here I have 18 to 29, and according to Ferris et al., this is the age that tends to be addicted to social media, the 2000s. Those born in the very late 90s and 2000s tend to be in the 90s, late 90s and 2000s tend to be more addicted because they were born, during the boom of internet and social media. Again, just double check these generations on internet, and then group the participants and create these age categories based on Gen Z, Gen X, and boomers. Again, boomers, for instance, those over probably 55 to maybe 65. Again, remember 65, anybody above 65 cannot participate according to research rules and traditions. So make sure you don't have participants over. You can go up to 64. I mean, up to 65 or up to 60. You know, it is. But nobody below the age of 18 and nobody above age 65 can participate in your study. With the under 18s, you need parents or guardians' permission, which would really be an inconvenience, a very long process uh, for the study. So, and then in terms of gender, you need to have the well-known gender categories, and then add other, and then add prefer not to say. Some people don't want, prefer not to say. So always have those options for race the same, the well-known racial categories in South Africa, and then add other and add prefer not to say, because some people may identify themselves, for instance, as Greek, as Jew, as Italian, so they might not use the categories that we know. Some people prefer not to say, others prefer to identify them as human or by their ethnic group or ethnicity. So always have an other and prefer not to say for these categories. So this is all, basically this is all that you are asked to ask for section B in your assignment guidelines. So just stick to the guidelines and ask only these three details, so that also you don't have a longer questionnaire. Remember, this is a pilot study. In a longer study, you could include a whole number of factors, such as how much you earn, whether you're working, where you're staying. And so here, just stick to these three that you were asked to include. And then now, in terms of the questionnaire items or variables, these are informed by the literature that you have read, and this is basically summarized in Ferris and Ferris et al., because their study or some of their scales were informed by Kim Hadarakis' study. Which was conducted in 2009. Basically, this study said that social and psychological characteristics of participants influence internet. And then Ferris et al. Said SM use motives. So not just internet, but just social media use motives. And then, so the social media use motives such as leisure motives might lead to social media, might lead to people using more or spending more time on social media, and then addiction might be internet or social media addiction in this case might be the outcome. So these factors or variables influence the type of questions that you would ask in your study, as you have seen in Ferris et al. Again, look at how they conducted and how they described their research method, their data collection, analysis, and analysis. And then in terms of contextual age, again, it's broken into life satisfaction and social activity. And then another factor would be social media use. So here, this is where you measure the social and psychological factors that influence social media motives. So in first, I'll say where people are less satisfied with their lives or have less social activity, they're more likely to use social media for leisure, entertainment, or to pass time. And they are also likely to spend more time on social media. And as a result, they might experience the intrusive consequences and the emotional consequences of social media addiction. So we have to ask this question. I will show you the scale. I'll make it was taken from Rubin and Rubin 1982, and they've listed the questions. I will show you just now. And then we have social media use, which is another factor. Here you ask people which social media they use. Then add none, also add none and other as options, because people might be using platforms from other countries that are not as popular in South Africa. So we have other, and then also have none for those who don't use social media at all, if there are such people. And then frequency of social media use, you have to ask people how often they use social media. For instance, hourly, daily, so you need to ask people about how frequently they use social media. Again, look at how other studies have done this. Look at Ferris et al. And other studies that those that measured, for instance, Twitter use, although here you are looking at social media in general, not just Twitter. For instance, questions that measure or even scales that measure frequencies such as never, once daily or twice daily, hourly, constantly. Just look at how people have measured frequency of use. And then also you need to have ranking questions. Again, go through your prescribed book on these ranking questions and also matrix items. This will help you actually in designing your questionnaire. So please go through this type of questionnaire items in your prescribed book, chapter 3. The next factor is motives for use. Motives already have been identified in other studies, especially motives for using social media, such as information seeking, information sharing, spying on other people. Some people use it to spy even on their children, what they're up to on social media. Entertainment, and also communication utility to communicate with friends or family. So there's those motives have already been identified in their studies, in other studies. So again, go through those studies. And then social media, again, addiction, you need to break it down into these two consequences, intrusive and emotional. Again, here it's always better to number your questions so that you know that this set of questions, especially here, you have to use matrix items. Go to your prescribed book, chapter 3, you will see what that is and how it makes it so much easier for you to structure your questions, and it also makes it easier for your participants to click and to select the right questions, and it will make the questionnaire take a much shorter time. So for most of these factors, such as motives for use, intrusive consequences, you need to use matrix items where you group questions that are related to that are about intrusive consequences. Questions about emotional need to be grouped together. Again, this info is available in your prescribed book. Okay, so here, for instance, then you could have, let's say, motives for use as question 3. C3, or you can just have a section. See, in this section, we'll be asking you questions about your social media use. This is how you can have a section and then describe what the brief description of what the section is about. And then, or you don't have to describe, but just have a section and then number each question. For instance, so you can say section C1. Then here you're asking motives for use. Again, remember there's a number of motives, such as entertainment, communication, communication utility, communicating with friends or family, or even expressing. Some people use social media as a diary where they share their feelings and what they're up to. So again, try to have fewer questions, especially when coming to motives for use. And for instance, here, some of these questions are repetitive. Again, Johnson and Young, when it's actually the study that dealt with Twitter, they have left the items, they've listed the items that they used in their study in that article at the end of the article. So you can go through that, use these items, except that you have to, when you're describing your data collection methods, you have to explain that you use the scale by Johnson and Young, 2009. You adapted it. For instance, you don't have to use all these questions. These questions, especially the ones in yellow, up until to past time, these questions deal with, most of them deal with just entertainment, except this one, to see what others are up to. This deals with basically just spying or being nosy. Another study called it that, which is one of the studies you also had to read on social, on the for your literature review. So you can use this and mention the fact that your statements were based on these items. For instance, I used social media to have fun, strongly agree, to strongly disagree, to be entertained. So questions that relate to entertainment. So here you can select 2 questions that relate to entertainment, or 3, for instance, to be entertained, to relax, to pass time. These relate to the use of social media for entertainment, basically. And then communication utility. Here you can select 2, let's say 2 questions again that deal with communication. For instance, to keep in touch with friends or family. You can have this question, and then to communicate with others more easily, or to communicate with many people at the same time. So you can use this question to communicate with many people at many times, and to keep in touch with friends. So all these, the questions in green, deal with communication motive. Social media is even much cheaper. It's much cheaper and easier to communicate with people via social media. And then information seeking motives. Here to get information, for instance, facts, links, news, knowledge, ideas, to get advice. This is also listed. You can have those 2 as questions dealing with information seeking motives. Then we have information sharing motives. So here, rather break this question. For instance, to give advice would fall under information sharing. To receive advice falls under information seeking. Even to learn interesting things, this would fall under information seeking. Again, try to have 2 questions under information seeking, 2 questions that are about using social media to be entertained, using social media to share information. For instance, to share information with others, facts, links, news, knowledge, ideas. This is sharing information. To participate in discussions. This is about the information sharing motive. To give advice. This is also about information sharing motive. For instance, we have experts on social media, such as lawyers, doctors, financial experts, freely giving advice on social media. So try to pick two for each motive so that you don't have a lot of questions here. Because when you analyze, it will be, quite tricky again, because this is a pilot study. So it's really not that necessary to have too many questions. And then coming to addiction. So here you'd need to have at least 5 items. So this is where you can now have many questions. Ferris et al., for instance, had 5 items that were about intrusive consequences. Again, you can't have these headings in your questionnaire. You just group questions and you deal directly. Don't even have headings such as intrusion. Participants don't need to know, what each question is all about or what each item, that is for you to know. So when you design a questionnaire, you make sure that all the factors that you were asked to measure and to study for this project, for this research project, that you have measured the negative consequences of social media, the motives, the media that people are using. So here you just go straight to the question but you can say, for instance, section C3, let's say this is your intrusive consequences. Then, okay, this you can delete because I lose track of time when I'm online. In a context where people have English as a second language, that is quite a vague question. And then you can have this: I stay online longer than I intended. Strongly agree to strongly disagree. I neglect household chores to spend more time online. Strongly agree to strongly disagree. I check emails and I check social media. Again, remember here, this was adapted by Ferris et al. To social media instead of just emails or specific platforms. For instance, I check my social media before doing other things. I would be more productive without going online. I would enjoy more hobbies without going online. I try to cut the amount of time I spend online, but fail. I lose sleep due to late night logins. You can also leave this out, but try to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Try to have, up to 5 or 6 of these questions. The rest, just leave them out. So this is how you'd measure your intrusive consequences. And then in terms of emotional consequences, again, both these items are in Kim and Hadarakis, 2009. I will upload these under additional resources or with this when I announce this the link to this recording. So in terms of emotional questions, again, with Ferris et al., they adapted. You can adapt somebody's questionnaire to suit your study. So here you can select the items that deal with emotional consequences. For instance, the highlighted questions actually deal more. So you can just select these 3. For instance, snap, yell, or act annoyed if others bother me when I'm online. I feel preoccupied with the internet when offline. If I cannot use internet, I miss it so much that I'm upset. I think these 3 deal directly with emotional consequences. So again, you can group these using the matrix items so that they are grouped together. Again, go through a prescribed book for this. And then contextual age. As I mentioned earlier, contextual age was based on a study by Rubin and Rubin, 1982. I think there's another study they conducted in 1986, but these are the items they used. Remember, contextual age was broken down by Torres et al. Into life satisfaction and social activity. So you can just use all these items. Again, you acknowledge the source. I will also upload Rubin and Rubin on myUnisa Moodle, so that you can have access to these questions. Again, you acknowledge that you use a scale for measuring life satisfaction and social activity developed by these authors. Again, always, you can always make sure that you check the language, make sure that it's very clear for a South African audience, for an audience where English is our second or third language. And then please go through your chapter 3, as I mentioned earlier, the do's and don'ts of formulating questionnaire statements or questions. For instance, according to deploy, avoid double-barreled questions, but for established scales, such as this one, I know one of these have an O, you can just use it as it is because it's a tried and tested scale. That is, and that or is not or something else. Usually the or and that you employ, like whether for instance, we say, do you give or receive information or on social media? Like, do you give or receive advice? So those are two different things, So you cannot use or rather break the question down to two. I use social media to give advice. I use social media to receive advice. Then people can strongly agree, disagree to those two questions, because now when you say to give or receive advice, when they say strongly agree, you don't know if they agree to giving advice or receiving advice. Then yeah, it gets very confusing for yourself and even for your participants. So that's what deploy actually discourages. So you try to have your questions, your items, even for open-ended questions, you don't have double-barreled questions where you have on or and or in your questions or statements. So please go through this chapter again, so it helps you to understand the reasons or the theory behind developing questions or statements in your questionnaire. And also deploy also give guidelines for open-ended questions. Again, you have to develop this on your own. And open-ended questions are usually follow-up, statements or follow-up questions on what you have already asked in the questionnaire. So, for instance, we could ask questions about benefits of social media and disadvantages of social media. Those can be two questions, because we can't, even though we know that there are negative consequences, but then there are also positives, outcomes of using social media, such as getting information, news anywhere, anytime. So you need to ask your participants both, although the study is, especially with those closed-ended questions, those will be looking mostly at the negative outcome. So when developing or formulating your open-ended questions, then you are here free. Again, there are guidelines. Your open-ended questions shouldn't elicit or put people in a corner where they have to say yes or no. For instance, deploy says any question that would ask with can you, would you, is more of a closed-ended question. Open-ended questions start with the what, why, how. Again, go through the deploy for section D of your questionnaire. Again, try to limit the number of words that respondents can use. For instance, to 300. Let's say 300 at most. Another thing I can tell you is try when doing this, start with questions about social media use. That is, start with questions with social media because that's like more of an icebreaker. You don't want to start with those emotional and intrusive. Those are quite heavy questions. You know, people might be thinking through their lives and, you know, having some regrets as they read those questions, especially when realizing that they really do spend more time, they would be more productive if they were using less social media. So always try to have those easier questions, you know, and then which social media use, that's what to start for, and then you start with, and then you can have motives for use, info sharing motives, and then have your, I mean, motives in general. Like I said, there'll be information sharing, information seeking, uh, entertainment or leisure motives, the convenience utility, such as people using online media or, I mean, social media for shopping, or if you want to ask about those who spy on others to check what others are up to or what their children are up to, then yeah, more yeah. Then with the your intrusive consequences and your life satisfaction and social activity questions, these should come later. Again, you could either start with contextual age and then end with those intrusive consequences and emotional. So heavier questions should always be towards the end of the study. And then again, read this chapter in your prescribed book that deals with these, how to also design, not just the questions that you need to include, but also how to structure, you know, in terms of multiple choice questions, where you just list where people have to select one option, where people have to rank, for instance, the most favorite or the most preferred social media app to the least favorite, least preferred, and then matrix items, and then section D is open-ended questions, and then section E is conclusion. And here, this is where you just thank the respondent for participating in the survey. Again, all these guidelines are in your tutorial letter, for your assignment 1, assignment 3 guidelines, especially for the assignment 3 for your portfolio. So please make sure that you follow the structure in your tutorial letter for assignment 3, which differs slightly from your assignment 1. And that is all. I wanted to show the examples I'll probably show you, but again, you can look for these examples yourself because you need to design your questionnaire and have it ready before the long weekend. That is all for today. So please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions about questionnaire design. This is just to help you make sure that you have asked everything that is relevant. You have asked relevant questions that you were asked to ask for your that will answer the research questions for this study. Other than that, thank you very much, and you can listen to this recording over days since it's a bit longer. Thank you. Thank you. Please feel free to contact me and other lecturers. Should you have any questions, should you want us to double check your questionnaire, feel free to contact us. Thank you.